For fans of console role-playing games in 1980s Japan, the Nintendo Famicom had Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy, Sega Systems had Phantasy Star, and the PC Engine had Tengai Makyou. At first glance, these games may look similar or maybe even identical, but obviously they have their differences, though something that sets Tengai Makyou apart from the others is an unfortunate one. Of the popular 80s JRPG series mentioned, it's the only one that never really had the chance to shine outside of Asian shores. In the December of 1988, the CD-ROM attachment for the PC Engine hit stores across Japan, establishing NEC's system as the first to utilize the CD format for gaming, even before personal computers. 6 months later, on June 30th, 1989, Hudson published Tengai Makyou ZIRIA for this add-on, making it the first ever role-playing adventure on compact disc. This may not sound like such a big deal now, but back then it allowed for new and exciting opportunities in gaming, as the optical medium storage capabilities dwarfed those of cartridges and floppy disks, allowing games like Tengai Makyou to create more expansive game worlds, but also include features such as detailed animated cutscenes and voice acting that would have been next to, if not impossible otherwise at the time.
冗談じゃねえよ。正門なんてやつ、おいら一人で十分だよ。ならば、行ってこい。
The game's soundtrack also benefited from the CD format by including a few orchestral arrangements, but even more impressive than that is the man behind the music, Ryuichi Sakamoto, the world-renowned musical pioneer who had just 2 years previously won the Academy Award for Best Original Score for his work on the film The Last Emperor. Yoshiteru Torajiro Tsujino came up with character designs and other artwork for Tengai Makyou, a role he would hold on to for pretty much the entirety of the series. Development was handled by Red Entertainment, known as Red Company then, and ZIRIA was actually the studio's first game, though their original vision for Tengai Makyou was as a live-action movie or animation. Red would go on to make other hits on the PC Engine, including the classic PC Genjin/Bonk titles and the Thunder shooting games, but perhaps their biggest claim to fame would be with a series that has a lot in common with Tengai Makyou, Sega's Sakura Taisen, another immensely popular Japanese video game franchise that mostly evaded Western shores over the years. Admittedly, if you do look past the visual and audio pizzazz presented by its CD-ROM package, Tengai Makyou ZIRIA may just seem like another product of the Dragon Quest boom period with a distinctly Japanese coat of paint. And regarding gameplay, it honestly really is just like Dragon Quest, sprinkled with a few innovations to the standard RPG game system. However, its unique premise, colorful cast of heroes and villains, and that aforementioned Japanese coat of paint is what really makes the game something special. The protagonists are the titular ZIRIA of the Toad Clan and his two companions, Tsunade of the Slug Clan and Orochimaru of the Snake Clan. They are the descendants of brave Fire Clan warriors who fought and sealed away the demon lord Masakado 1,000 years ago, saving the land from disaster and doom. Like their ancestors before them, the young heroes are tasked with defending their country from evil, facing a new but familiar threat in the form of the Daimon cult. This strange religious movement has swept over the country under the guise of ushering in an era of peace, but actually intends to revive Masakado and transform the world to fit their demonic vision. The only way to prevent this dark resurrection is for the three heroes of the Fire Clan to combine their powers and embark on a quest to take out the 13 generals of the Daimon cult. Tengai Makyou ZIRIA is loosely based on the legends of Jiraiya, which typically tell the tale of a young ninja and his companion Tsunade who must battle with their nemesis Orochimaru, utilizing their toad and slug magic against his snake magic. And no, that's not some sort of innuendo. You could say that the story in this game is a reinterpretation of this classic folktale, but it may also be accurate to describe it as a misinterpretation. Tengai Makyou is presented as a game adaptation of a historical novel called Far East of Eden, written by Mr. Paul Hieronymus Chada, also known as P.H. Chada, Director of Oriental Studies at the Smithsonian. The story of Far East of Eden takes place in the Golden Country of Japan, an old name for Japan derived from Marco Polo's 13th century travels, and is full of Western misconceptions and exaggerations of Japanese history, mythology, and culture from centuries before. As you'd imagine, this means there's a lot of humor to be found in Tengai Makyou ZIRIA, which gives the game a charm that's uniquely Japanese, but not quite Japanese at the same time. And of course, this novel and its author are completely fictitious, concocted from the mind of the game's real writer and producer, Teruhisa Oji Hiroi. The fictional story of adapting P.H. Chada's work and transforming it into a game are all presented in ZIRIA's wonderfully designed and thick instruction manual. Back then, detailed and aesthetically pleasing player manuals and game packages were a common thing, especially for RPGs, but this one goes the extra mile, showing the amount of effort, dedication, and faith Hudson and Red put into this project. While Tengai Makyou ZIRIA has an interesting and storied history and a unique place among PC Engine and role-playing games, it isn't even the title that defines the series. Rather, it's the game's 1992 sequel that holds that distinction, Tengai Makyou 2, MANJIMARU. This second act takes all the elements that made its predecessor great and improves upon them in almost every way, thanks to a more experienced Red and the superior Super CD-ROM format introduced in 1991. Additionally, the extraordinarily large production budget allocated to Manjimaru helped craft a worthy follow-up to ZIRIA, and it may have been the most expensive game ever made up until that time, considered by some to be the world's first AAA title. The time, devotion, and money poured into the sequel resulted in a bigger, better adventure, with a more fantastic visual presentation and a much faster pace both in terms of gameplay and story progression. Similar to the original, Tengai Makyou 2 follows the exploits of its titular character, Manjimaru, another hero who draws lineage from the Fire Clan. Where the first game took place in Japan's eastern Bando region, Tengai Makyou 2 takes place in the western Yamato region, 3 years later. 1,000 years ago, 7 heroes of the Fire Clan had a war with the Root Clan, and sealed away its leader, the Dark God Yomi, to prevent the destruction of their world. Sounds a bit familiar, doesn't it? In the present day, 7 enormous dark orchids have sprung up across the country, uprooting the lives of many in Japan, signaling the dreaded return of the Root Clan. Manjimaru and his party of Fire Clan descendants must travel the lands, collect the 7 holy weapons used by the heroes of old to cut down the orchids, and halt the return of Yomi. Tengai Makyou ZIRIA had its fair share of humor and drama, but Manjimaru cranks up both to 11. There are a lot of funny and crazy scenes and set pieces in the game, but the laughs are balanced out by blood, sweat, and tears brought on by conflict and tragedy, and at least one parental advisory moment. Both of these games create a fantastic, believable world full of wonderful and memorable characters. It's just that the story is fleshed out quite a bit more in Tengai Makyou 2. While Ryuichi Sakamoto was not involved in the sequel soundtrack, the music here is somehow even more grand than the originals, thanks to its 2 composers, Hirohiko Fukuda and Joe Hisaishi. Yes, that Joe Hisaishi, probably best known for his work on classic Studio Ghibli movies as well as some of Takeshi Kitano's finest films. In my opinion, as an iconic RPG, Tengai Makyou 2 Manjimaru is to the PC Engine as Chrono Trigger is to the Super NES or Final Fantasy VII is to the PlayStation. It set a high bar for role-playing games of the era and is arguably the most popular and best-selling game on the PC Engine. It was so successful that a spin-off title starring one of its main characters was published just a year later, Tengai Makyou Fuun Kabukiden. This is another fully fledged and finely crafted offering from Red that places players in the role of Kabuki Danjuro, the most flashy man in all of Japan, as he embarks on a hilarious and exciting role-playing adventure. The story takes place fittingly 1 year after the end of Manjimaru, and ties together the events and heroes from both Tengai Makyou 1 and 2. The Daimon cult from the first game has suddenly reappeared, and they've begun abducting all of the women of Japan for some unknown purpose, much to the displeasure of Kabuki. Fellow Snake Clan brother Orochimaru sends the protagonist on a mission to take out the Daimon cult, a mission so great that it takes him to lands beyond Japan, specifically London. While it's not Tengai Makyou 3, it is one of the greatest RPGs of the 16-bit era and a Far East of Eden fan favorite, even if the encounter rate is too damned high. It's also secretly a musical, one of the first video games to feature actual musical numbers. The Kabuki character was so beloved that besides getting his own RPG, he was also featured in his own PC Engine exclusive fighting game, as well as a promotional Bomberman title. And Hudson liked the character so much that he was sort of used as one of the company's mascots in the mid-90s, which was very fitting as he's one of the most 90s video game characters ever. Man, what a time that was. The PC Engine Tengai Makyou RPGs were huge titles in the late 80s and early 90s that left a long and lasting legacy in the Japanese video game industry with its many ports, sequels, remakes, and related games, media, and merchandise. It's a legacy that was mostly contained within the borders of Japan, which is a shame. If you're a fan of RPGs, the PC Engine, Hudson Soft, or just good games, then you really ought to try and discover the magic of Tengai Makyou. And this shouldn't be too difficult, since 30 years after its conception, the East really isn't so far away anymore. But then again, to truly enjoy these games, you'll need to have a decent command of the Japanese language. Hopefully, there will be a bigger effort to give non-Japanese speakers access to the fantastic land of Japan in the future, whether officially sanctioned or not. And let's just hope that it doesn't resort to the use of a fleet of black ships to make it happen. This is Jimmy Hoppa from Import Gaming for the win, and I hope you enjoyed that small glimpse into Tengai Makyou. Thanks for watching. Take care.